Pigeons on the net, let me reason. And before I start, this one hard, so brace yourself. When we hear about slavery, we always hear that Africans was brought to the Caribbean as permanent labor. But what I really mean, the only thing permanent was the system, but the enslaved, them did work to the grave because the plantocracy found it cheaper to bring in new Africans rather than let them live long, have families, and build generations. Let me repeat. The plantocracy found it cheaper to bring in new Africans rather than let them live long, have families, and build generations. Tell me, how many of you did know that? So this Sunday, let me call out one of the biggest myths that slavery in Barbados was about sustainable labor. It was not. It was about squeezing every last drop out of people and replacing them like livestock. Before we get started, if one didn't see the last episode on the 1661 slave code, go and watch that one first, because that will give you the setup, but the whole system that give the planters the power to do what them like and make this brutality legal. No, in most places, people in charge want workers to last, as you did hear in the stories on TV and thing. But in Barbados, the sugar industry did so brutal, so physically demanding, that the planters decided that they're going to work the people to the bone instead of looking after them. And here's what really happened. Sugar was king, and sugar was backbreaking from sunup to sundown in the blazing heat. Cutting cane, hauling loads, and dealing with dangerous equipment that take away the lives of we ancestors. The enslaved was malnourished, exhausted, and constantly brutalized. The average lifespan for an enslaved African brought to Barbados, now listen to this, 5 to 7 years. That hurt my heart. Most of them, they gone before 30. Few live to 40. The system was designed to wring people dry and toss them where once they couldn't work no more. This wasn't about permanent labor. This did about disposable labor. In places like the US, for example, plantation owners forced the enslaved people to have children, because them children would be born into bondage and provide new labor. But in Barbados, them planters had a whole different plan. Children didn't take too long to grow. A baby can't work for 5 years, and planters was about that life. Pregnant enslaved women were seen as useless. Instead of allowing them to rest, they then worked them to the bone till they miscarry. Then worked the men to the brink too. Most of them, they gone, passed away before them even had a chance to build a family. Buying new enslaved Africans was more cost effective. The transatlantic slave trade was so profitable, the planters decided it made more sense to use up a body and bring in a new one. This is why a lot of the Bajans today descend from later waves of enslaved Africans, not the first group that arrived in the 1600s. Now let we get into the receipts. In 1786, a document came out detailing how to manage a plantation efficiently. But when you read it, you see it was just a manual for breaking enslaved people down. Some of the disgusting things say. The work schedules, then did something else. 18-hour days, barely no rest, and night shifts. Beatings was a policy. If the enslaved person slowed down, the whip was the only answer. Food and housing was deliberately poor, just enough to keep people barely surviving. Because I guess they can't get accustomed to the good life. Relationships were controlled. Planters ain't want enslaved people forming bonds and raising families. That could lead to a rebellion, and them can't take that. Look, Bajans on the net, this wasn't an accident. It did a well-oiled system to ensure enslaved Bajans ain't live long. By the 1700s, Britain did start to notice something shocking. In most places, enslaved populations was naturally growing because people did having families. But in Barbados, the population did declining. Yes. In 1698, Barbados had over 42,000 enslaved Africans. By the 1700s, despite importing thousands upon thousands more, the population wasn't growing like it should. Why? Brutal working conditions, high mortality rates, disease. The enslaved people were overworked. They were malnourished and constantly exposed to outbreaks of yellow fever, dysentery, smallpox that did unalive thousands of people. And as I did tell one before, many of the newly arrived Africans didn't survive long after landing on the island. At the same time, the transatlantic slave trade shifted to other colonies like Jamaica and Saint Domingue. So Barbados wasn't receiving as many new captives. On top of that, because the enslaved woman was too overworked and underfed to have many children, the birth rates did low. But by the mid to late 1700s, the population did start to rise again. Not because of new imports though, but because more enslaved Bajans was being born in the island and surviving longer. Barbados did now having a Creole enslaved population, meaning generations of enslaved people were now locally born rather than newly imported. By the 1800s, there were over 60,000 enslaved Bajans, far outnumbering the white elites. And that imbalance, well, that was why the plantocracy kept passing stricter and stricter laws. Look, Bajans on the net, let me get one thing straight. We ancestors didn't just sit down and take that. Some of them did escape and run away and form them own little tiny communities. Some sabotage the system and burn down the crops and wreck the tools. Some of them even put a little something in the enslavers' food. Some of them did rise up like Bussa in the rebellion in 1816. Check out more on that in the next episode next Sunday. Some of them hold on to them identity. Despite the horror, them keep up with the African traditions, the music, the language, the spirit, things that we should be doing. Look, them people then try to erase we, but we still here. And we need to remember that. Look, this system ain't just disappear by the way. It left deep scars that's still affecting we in epigenetic or generational trauma. Right? This work till you drop mentality that we got. We Bajans still feel the pressure to work nonstop because that mentality was beaten into we ancestors. We got health struggles, generations upon generations of malnutrition and trauma still affecting we bodies today, even if we try to ignore them. And economic inequality, look, the wealth that the planters built off the enslaved labor, still benefiting some families today. Am I right? While we Bajans still fighting to own land and businesses. Look, I implore you, stop talking about slavery like if it is some distant thing that we need to forget. It shaped the Barbados that we know today. Think about that. So let me talk. They want to know this? They want to hear how Barbados was one of the most unaliving places for enslaved Africans? How much of this they want to learn in school? Drop your thoughts in the poll and the comment section because we need to have a talk about this. And don't forget, if you want to see the last episode on the 1661 slave code last Sunday, go and watch that because it set up everything that we talk about in this episode. I'm going to talk to one next Sunday.